Hello and welcome to Penguin Review's radio show. Today we're going to be talking about young adult literature and middle grade literature. I'm sitting here today with Fiona, Mike, and oh my god,
Jordan. It's okay.
I'm Tom, and today I'm lacking for words. All right, everybody can say hello.
Hello. Good afternoon. Okay. So I thought we'd start out with what young adult or middle grade novels we've read most recently. Start from there and then go into a discussion about the genre in general. So, if someone wants to start.
I am still trying to read through Harry Potter.
Okay.
Then also that Fablehaven I talked about on the Fantasy Day. I'm actually currently reading I'm kind of reading it. Firestarter, the Stephen King YA novel. I think it's YA. At least that's what it said in the description. But I'm kind of using it as like a reading, like training thing for like something I'm trying to do. But that's besides the point. That's what I've read recently.
Wow, they listed Firestarter as young adult literature. Wow.
That's what I think it was. I might have like misinterpreted it or something, but that's what it seemed like. So yeah, I understand where you're. Yeah, it's definitely
kind of violent.
Yeah.
Who here has read Harry Potter?
I have. Do I remember all the things that happened? No, because I read it forever ago, and a lot of my plot points, unfortunately, I pull from the movies, which I know aren't 100% accurate. But
How old were you when you read it?
okay. I'm trying to think. I know that I read like the last couple came out when I was in high school, and so I had to have started. Oh, no, I started reading it after the second movie came out. So I think that was late elementary school.
What about you?
I was 8 when I read the first Harry Potter book. What had actually happened was my parents were listening to, I think it was NPR, and they heard about this really popular British children's book. So they went out to the store and bought it and read it last night. But I try to reread the books every summer because I love them, so...
My mom was working at a book fair, and I think they came out in 1997 or something. So I was right around 12 or 13 years old, and she came home with this book called Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and it had some little kid on it flying on a broom, reaching out for some golden orb with wings. And I looked at it and I was thinking to myself, what in the world is this crap? I don't want to read this. Eventually, she said, no, it's about a wizarding world, and apparently there's violence, and there's fighting, and he has to duel a bad wizard. And I was like, all right, sweet, I'll read it. So I actually got into reading Harry Potter, and then I couldn't wait for the next one, and the next one after that, and the next one after that, and so on and so forth. I think that those are really good young adult books, because they get kids into reading. They get young adults into reading. Would you consider those more young adult or middle grade? Anyone?
I would say middle grade personally.
Yeah, I'd probably say middle grade. And I saw somewhere online some discussion on Twitter about like what's considered young adult or whatever. And the couple people who are having this discussion are very much like Harry Potter is not young adult. So I'm assuming they were talking about middle grade. But I think it's almost kind of like a different thing because it kind of spans it. Because he ages, like the characters age, and then also the material ages with like the readers as they go on. So
I think that's what my main idea was. My main question was, Harry Potter goes from being young and almost Hobbit-esque. We'll throw the Hobbit out there again. Young and almost Hobbit-esque to being these large books, and the larger books, by the end, even I would argue by the time it gets to Goblet of Fire, the fourth book, they start getting a lot more toward young adult than middle grade. So I don't know how you would classify a series that really goes from middle grade to young adult, if you would just stick it at middle grade, if you would take it to young adult, or if you would have a specific cutoff.
Yeah, I think you have a good point with the fourth book is a really good, like, where the young adult kind of takes over. Because, in my mind, obviously now it's not so, I don't want to use the word traumatic, but shocking. But, I mean, the whole plot line with Cedric Diggory and the just kind of the aftermath of the unraveling of what was happening. It's, in my mind, it's not necessarily a young concept because there's a lot of, I don't know. I mean, it is young, obviously, but like the middle grade, just a middle grade book does not reveal that type of, and obviously it's young to us, but just, I guess from a book perspective, it got me to think a lot, and it's just kind of one of those things that kind of catered more to an upper level than a middle grade, in my opinion.
What about you, Fiona and Jordan?
I think that, well, the fourth book, I think it would almost be underestimating middle school readers if we were to cut it off there. Like, I think I was in middle school when that book came out, and it's definitely a transitional point in the series. And if you look at how Rowling crafted it, that makes a lot of sense, that book would be the bridge from middle grade to young adult literature. But I would, if I had to, like, put them in a library, instead of splitting them up, I would probably put them all in, like, the middle grade area, because I would rather young readers challenge themselves and ask themselves these questions rather than saying, like, no, you cannot handle this because you're too young, when really it's, the difference of a couple of years.
Yeah, I think the classifications, I know the classifications for middle grade and young adult are very, like, murky, and it varies depending on who you ask, what bookstore or library you go to. Like, recently my home library has split out a separate section just for, like, young adult books, but there still are books that I would consider, like, young adult in the kids section. So I wouldn't know how to classify it. I guess you could just put Harry Potter under the umbrella term of their younger readers, kids books, but I wouldn't even necessarily call it kids books, because that makes it sound like children's books, like the dog sat here type books, which they're not. So I don't know.
I do think you bring up a good point with challenging the readers, because it's a very in-depth plot throughout, speaking of Harry Potter, but it's just it does expand a reader's mind past a standard 1-2 skiddly-doo plot that maybe a middle grade thing would set up. So I think that is a really good point, is getting a young reader to start expanding their expectations of what a book can really bring out.
I think I saw middle grade and young adult really the first time that I saw them when I was younger. The best example that I can give would be Goosebumps, Ghost of Fear Street, and Fear Street. Goosebumps would be for young, lower than middle grade. Ghost of Fear Street gets into middle grade, and then Fear Street was R.L. Stein's attempt at young adult.
Well, I think that it's a little bit different by gender, truth be told, because we have a lot of young adult, middle grade children's books for female readers, or readers that they're trying to market to who are female. But we have, the scary stories mostly written by R.L. Stein, not really much else for, male readers, or at least that are marketed towards them.
I think that's a shame.
Yeah.
I hope that they're kind of stepping away from that now. I think that they're kind of stepping away from that now, a little bit, but not very much. Scary stories for everyone.
Okay, well, going back to what YA books we've recently read, since we kind of diverged into Harry Potter there. Fiona, have you read any recently that you want to...
Yeah, I actually took last semester a literature for the middle school reader class. So I read a bunch in there. What sticks out in my mind is Yaki Delgado Wants to Kick Your Butt. It has a different word instead of butt, but I don't think we can say that on this show. And Guys Read Funny Stories. And Guys Read Funny Stories sticks out in my mind because it was specifically, marketed towards male readers. It was short stories written by young adult authors. And they were, like, a little bit gross, and I think that that's why they tried to market it towards male readers. But I've also been reading some John Green, obviously, with his movies coming out, and then some Barry Lyga as well, who is a little-known young adult author, but who I love dearly.
What about you, Tom?
The last young adult novel that I read was over summer, and it was John Green's Fault in Our Stars.
Okay.
Good book.
Yeah, I thought it was very good. I liked how he didn't dumb down cancer for kids, and he didn't dumb down relationships. He made it seem like the relationship was a very young relationship, sure, but it was also a relationship that could be mature at some points. There were some aspects of it that weren't very young love.
Yeah.
And I thought that he did a good job of portraying a semi-healthy relationship for young adult readers that isn't seen in a lot of young adult novels, which was pretty impressive. I haven't read anything else by John Green, but I found his work, well, that work to be worthwhile.
Yeah, I haven't read a whole lot. Well, I read a couple John Green novels, but I think they were more like his slightly obscure ones. What was it? One was Paper Towns, and then there was another one. My sister picked it out for me.
Looking for Alaska?
Nope.
Nope. Different
Notes
one.
of Catherine's?
Nope. Never mind. I don't remember. I swear there was another one. I know I read Paper Towns.
It's there, and then there's Will Grayson.
Yep. Nope. Okay.
Nope.
Maybe I've only
Okay.
read Paper
All
Towns.
right.
But the most recent, I'm trying to think, young adult books that I've read. Well, I reread the first Mortal Instruments book over the break. The City of Bones, I think, is the first one. I wish I could talk about it like analytically, but I mean, I liked it. My favorite thing about that series is like the characters are so snarky, and I think that that's my favorite thing of any book. But I notice it a lot in young adult books, like the snarky, sassy, because I think it's like synonymous with like being in your teenage years. You kind of like develop that attitude, try to make yourself like your own person or whatever, and so you kind of have that snarky thing. Another one that I've read recently was which I talked about this in the Sci-Fi Fantasy Show, was The Strange Maid, which is the second book in the United States of Asgard series by Tessa Gratton. And I love that series. I haven't read, she has another series that I haven't read, but I want to because I think she is an excellent young adult author, because she gives so much stuff, that's not a good word, but in her books she isn't afraid to like take it out there. It's a very like world heavy, mythology heavy, because it's based, it brings in like the Norse mythology and stuff like that, and she doesn't like pull any punches. She doesn't try to dumb it down for the readers, which is great, and I think she crafts it so well that it's easy to read, it's easy to follow, and it seems almost natural that the United States would be run or have the Norse gods like there helping out the people and integrated into the culture and everything. It just seems real natural. I didn't at one point go, oh well, why? I just like, oh yeah, of course they would do this, you know. So
you mentioned something interesting, and it was the words dumbing down. I think that too often we dumb down middle grades or young adults, and I don't think that it's healthy at all. I like when authors actually try to go highbrow for young readers. By higher brow for young readers, I mean actually using bigger words that the young readers will understand, using context clues, and challenging them, offering things for them to actually think about, offering some major topics instead of just, oh, you go, here's this love triangle. Again,
Right.
Here's a love triangle involving a vampire and a werewolf. Okay, sorry for calling it out. Well, wait, no, that's a lot of young adult series. Here's this, and it gets so repetitive, and young adult readers are expecting it. And whereas some people will read that, some teenagers will love reading that, and that's good because they read. It's schlock. If you're not challenging a reader, you're not really doing anything for them.
What I think a lot of authors mix up is that the kids reading this need to have something that they're able to relate to. And they're young, but they're not stupid. So I think that kids can relate to a lot of things, but I actually think that the repetitive, almost formulaic plots are sometimes a good thing. I don't think every book needs to be like that, but you know, when you're going through that as a kid and you're reading a book about it, you're like, oh man, something understands. This is exactly what I'm experiencing in my very limited lifespan so far. And I think that adult readers will also flock to young adult books because it will kind of replay that experience for them on some level. So I don't think that formulaic is a bad thing, but I do agree that we need to up the ante a little bit.
I think that's a good point because we were all actually no. This is my first question because there's a couple of things I had.
Okay.
What is the kind of, now I know like the age group, but what is there like a certain like specifically age kind of young adult that they kind of shoot for? Like is it like 13 to 15 or like 13 to 16, like that type of thing?
I think it varies per publisher. I think like the general rule is like I mean, if you want to go very, very general, like high school is young adult, and middle grade is like middle school and late elementary school. But like the ranges, I think, change based on publisher and agent and how they want to market the specific book. I took a writing the youth novel class, and one of the differences that they made the point, not so much age group, but what makes the difference between a middle grade and a young adult novel, was that middle grade are much more like plot driven. Like it's a plot, not I mean, there is character development, but that's not what the focus is. And then young adult kind of like flips it, and it's more about there is plot, obviously, but it's more focused on like how the character grows from the beginning to the end, which sort of makes sense for like the age groups that you're going. And again, with the like finding yourself type thing when you're a teenager and trying to figure out what your identity is. So, and then also because plot driven stories are slightly easier to read, so like the younger readers can follow it more. Not saying that they couldn't follow a character driven story, but that's like the general rules between middle grade and young adult.
I think you could expand the age range a little bit, especially with the series, probably up until people in their early 20s.
Definitely. What was my other point? I forget. I had another point. I don't know.
Okay, well, I had one that because you mentioned about, Fiona, how like adults go back to read it. I wanted to pose the idea of like what makes young adult so appealing. It's become very, very popular in the recent years, which has caused it actually to get some like bad press almost, like people like putting down adult readers for reading young adult because it's supposedly childish or whatever. So I was just wondering what you guys thought made young adult so appealing to readers of all ages.
The material isn't necessarily always dumbed down, and they're usually quick reads. A lot of people like reading, but they don't have time or patience to read an 800-page novel. Some people will read both. A lot of people will read both. However, there are some people that just want to have a quick story. They want a character-driven story that's written well, that they can get through in anywhere from 1 to 5 days. A young adult novel is usually something that you can get through within 5 days, even if you're a slower reader. And I think that's really appealing to a lot of adults, even in the business world when they're first starting off, just to have something to go to rather than Netflix marathoning everything.
I agree. I think that young adult novels are kind of like the short stories of old. You can, still be reading and still be engaged, but you can get through it kind of quickly. And I was just thinking, like, once you were talking about the books that you've read, I started thinking about the Ms. Marvel series in Marvel Comics that they just started. And I know it's a comic, but yes, thank you. I would definitely classify that as young adult literature. And I think that that's really great because, a lot of times you don't see people messing up, especially teenagers. Young teenage girls are usually kind of like feisty, but this one, she represents the minority, which I really like. And she's really into Tumblr, and she idolizes these people because she's a fan of them. She hasn't been trained her whole life to do that. So I think that people can still relate to that kind of feeling of I don't know what to do into their 20s.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It also reminds me of, it's the same thing with music. People love the music that they listen to in their teens. Obviously, there are some exceptions to that, but it goes for reading too, because it's just a form of media or form of entertainment, and I think it's a very home feel, that they can go back to, and it might not necessarily be the same books or whatnot, but it can really trigger just a peace of mind once in a while.
Ultimately, for me, I think the reason why I keep going back to it is I just find like the plots that the ideas, the premises of these young adult books, like when I look through the bookstore or at the library, just seems so much more interesting than some of the stuff that I see being written for adults. Now, granted, I don't go through all the shelves of the adult books because they outnumber the young adult greatly, but and also I kind of like I think it presents almost the idea of like an underdog, because a lot of like the for the fantasy and the adventure ones, it's always like this teen having to go and have like this weight of the world on their shoulders or something and go and do something, and it's not what you would normally expect. Typically you expect like a 30-year-old man or something like that having to go and do this big thing, but it's like a 16-year-old girl, and so you're kind of like rooting for them a little bit as the underdog. And then I've also kind of noticed that, at least in recent years, with the shift with the YA being popular, I think YA authors aren't as afraid to tackle some like ideas and concepts as some of the like established adult authors are, like with like the gay and lesbians communities and like suicide and because I know like suicide is like a big one in the young adult. I've read multiple ones with teenagers dealing with suicide and stuff like that, which in probably not too far long ago that would have been like taboo, like, oh no, we can't write about that, you don't want to show like this children that they don't need to read about that, but why not? It is in the world, they do need to, this is something that they deal with, and so I think that kind of gives it an appeal too, because I feel like the young adult authors, at least the ones that I've seen, are a little bit more willing to take risks in that type of aspect.
My gosh, especially now, I am so thankful that Facebook and Tumblr and all of these social networks did not exist when I was a teenager, because the way that they're working for some young people in high school, I think that young adult novels are fine for focusing on suicide. There are a lot of young people committing suicide and young people even attempting or getting into fights or being bullied.
Yeah.
And if a young adult novel addresses that, or even a middle grade novel, it's happening in middle grades too, then I think it's a good thing. I don't understand why somebody would harp on that.
Yeah.
On that note, unless...
No, that's
okay.
good.
On that note, it's 12:25, so we should probably take a break.
Where it's a little bit darker, and when it gets a little bit hotter, we'll take it off on out in the water. Girl, you make my speakers go boom boom, dancing on the tailgate in the full moon. That kind of thing makes a man go You're looking so good in what's left of those blue jeans. Drip of honey on the money maker, gotta be the best buzz I'm ever gonna find. Hey, I'm a little drunk on you and high on summertime. Yeah, I'm a little drunk on you.
Body in the club, know what's up. What's a while you twerk? Go ahead and start. What's a while you twerk? Yin yang in this Let me see you make the minute forward. Good Lord, make it shake like a salt shaker. Too hard, get it up till you can't pump. No more, see I love it when you take it to the floor, baby, bounce, big and bounce, huh? It's on you, shawty,
city like quakes. The haters blue in the face like Gonzo, cause I'm breaking the cake, so let's bake. I'm taking the game's mine. Y'all witness the change, it's my time. Yeah, I'm new to the game, but y'all might wanna say your whack raps, daylight saving time. I can dance, homie, on two-step. Y'all looking at something like a true player. A girl told me that a man that can dance might could possibly get down with the tool in his pants. Now, my ladies, let me see it vibrate. And when it's over, you ain't gonna need your bow. Cause I'm a pro, make you bend your back load and the pound it real fast, just like the percolate. Wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble. Yeah. 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 Say man, like they cover racket shit. Damn, I'm so explicit, but I can't help it, my flow ridiculous. Boy, got a gift like it gotta be Christmas. Swag on this like it gotta be gifted. The girls brought cameras and they want pictures and they gon' frame them. See that? Let them to the bed while I'm saying my scriptures. Cause I leave you holy like you pray in the temple. 1B, I move with the letter of a pencil. And mine won't miss you. Good night, kiss you. Take a damn back, cause you got pistol. And I don't think Donnie pick her up these issues. Wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble. Yeah. Wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble. Yeah. Wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble. Yeah. Wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble, baby, wobble. Yeah.
For Rookery Radio.
Rookery Radio watches the Valley CW. What about you? Weekday mornings, it's Order in the Court on WBCB.
Tonight at 8 p.m., watch The Arrow. It's the return of Deathstroke and Tommy Merlin. Malcolm puts Oliver and Thea in a dangerous situation that lands them on Lin Yu with Oliver's former enemy, Deathstroke. A flashback reveals when Oliver and Maceo returned to Starling City to retrieve the Omega bioweapon, and despite being under strict orders from Amanda Waller not to reveal himself to anyone, Oliver looks in on his family, Laurel and Tommy. Only on CW, tonight at 8.
Okay, welcome back to the Penguin Review Show, talking about young adult lit. I had a question over the break, and now I forget it. So, yeah. Anyone want to jump in here? Continue our discussion about YA and middle grade?
I'm still in arrow mode.
Well, going off of that, what do you guys think about young adult comics?
I think they're amazing.
Okay. So, like, what titles have people read?
Well, let's see here. Graphic novel wise, Watchmen's really big, but is that young adult?
I
No.
wouldn't consider that young adult.
Never read it, so just throwing it out there.
It was racy.
Yeah,
Yeah, a little.
I never.
I don't know if I've ever actually read any young adult comics. Which is actually, now that I say that, is probably a lie. Because if I think about all the, like, manga I've read, that's probably considered young adults. But actual, like, comic-wise, like Marvel and DC, like, because you mentioned Miss Marvel, I didn't even realize that there were young adult comics. Like, I didn't know that was a thing. I'm still very new into the comic world.
I know. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Bone is that is like an epitome of like a YA like graphic novel. It's an epic, really, is what it is, because it's. I mean, I forget how many volumes it is. Well, then it depends on how many, how you're going to split it up. But huge, omnibus of just an amazing story of these little, just little practically like almost stick figure-y like characters, but they're like kind of like, it's really well done. But I wouldn't want to compare it to a stick figure, but that's just the first thing that popped in my mind, because it's a lot better art than that. But it starts off with a very simple, like cutesy story, but then it continually tumbles into this huge, epic of good versus evil, and it's something else, that's for sure.
2. Mouse and Persepolis. And I would say that Mouse is one because you can teach it right along Diary of Anne Frank. Mouse is about a young man talking with his father about the Holocaust and trying to learn about his father and deal with it. And he's writing all about dealing with his father and what his father's telling him. And he made the decision that he was going to make Jewish people mice, and anybody that was brought up against opposition against Nazis mice, and he made Nazis cats. And it plays out very well, and it's extremely well written, and I think that it works right next to Diary of Anne Frank. Try getting a high school to let people teach that right next to Diary of Anne Frank. That's a little bit more rough.
Gorgeous book, though.
Oh, yeah, it's fantastic. The writing in it and the artwork is just so great. And Persepolis, I don't know, have you read Persepolis?
Yes.
Persepolis is... Marjane Satrapi wrote it, and it's about a young woman's experiences as she moved from newly Islamic rule to France. Her parents moved her to France so that she would be safe, and how she grew up, her loss of innocence, how she's living now, etc. And it's also, I would just classify it as fantastic. But on a completely separate note, Mark Millar, who's written some rather racy comics, Kick-Ass among them, it's the title. He wrote one called Superior. It's about a young boy who is in a wheelchair. And he wasn't always in a wheelchair. He used to be a star basketball player at his school, and he finds out that he has multiple sclerosis. ends up in this wheelchair, meets a monkey from space that comes to him in his dreams, and the monkey grants him one wish, and his one wish is to become superpowered, and he becomes this superhero named Superior. It's a lot of fun, and I think that it puts a new spin on disabilities and the disabled, and giving them power to beyond that of what people usually see, which is, oh, these people have absolutely nothing, we need to, take care of them, baby them. But it gives the disabled power, and I think when you give anybody that's handicapped power, it's a good thing. I think that'd be very valuable for a young adult to read.
That kind of ties back into what I was saying before the break about how the young adult authors tend to talk about things that haven't been talked about, like and addressing things like that, which I feel is very important too. If we look at the young adult and middle grade books as tools or things that help the children, like people develop into who they want to be because of the self-discovery, stuff like that, it's so important then that those books tackle things like disabilities, cancer, diseases, suicide, things like that.
I don't know if it's been a while since I read it, but pretty sure Scott Pilgrim a little older.
Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Yeah.
Okay. Because it's been a while since I read it, so I can't exactly remember.
I could see an argument for it being YA, but I think that's, if anything, it's older YA. Just because of some of the themes and some of the things that they do in the story.
Yeah.
Probably starting at about 16 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brian, Mallory? Is that his name?
Brian O'Malley.
Malley? That's it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's it.
Yeah, his stuff is really good. I read Seconds, his new one that just came out. That's not necessarily, it could go either way. That's 16 and above category, definitely. But he's very talented with his, certain area of his age. Because, we're not, it just is hard to place his stuff, I would say. But.
Sorry. We probably don't have a whole lot of time left since there'll be a show on after us. So, how about we talk about like recommendations, young adult or middle grade books that we feel are like definitely like you should read. These are great instances of the genre.
Besides Harry Potter.
Yeah, besides
nobody
Harry
knows.
Potter.
Oh, okay. Let's see here. I would definitely recommend, even though it's older, Scott Pilgrim because it's fun. And Bone. Oh, Bone, definitely. That is, just fantastic. Jeff Smith is serious. It's just a masterpiece, in my mind. But those would definitely be my two.
I would say Ms. Marvel. I think that it's one of the best comics that's going on right now. Teen Titans is always a good one, but they're rebooting that in the summer. So if you're interested in getting one, just wait till they reboot it. And then I would also say by Barry Lyga, The Astonishing Adventures of Fanboy and Goth Girl.
I read that. Yeah.
It's a fantastic book.
That was a great book.
A lot of people don't read it. The sequel is not so good. Just ignore the sequel. But his whole series in that high school is just so great, except Goth Girl Rising. That's not a great book.
Oh, I didn't realize that there were multiple books set in that. I'll have to look those
I do
up.
remember reading that.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Persepolis, Mouse, and The Fault in Our Stars. All of them are good. All of them are very, very apt to our time. I believe that there are lessons to be learned in each. And Superior, which will probably never be taught in schools for anybody that feels like branching out a little bit.
Wow, I'm trying to narrow it down. I read a lot of YA, and so ones I'd recommend. I'm always continuously going to recommend The United States of Asgard by Tessa Gratton because I am in love with that series. And I just think it's a really cool, like, fun series to read. And there are also, like, character development, self-discovery things to learn in there, too. It's set in the fantasy setting, which I think is ultimately always the best way for me anyway, is I love to get the escapism, but then also like this could actually apply to me in real life type thing. Another one that I would recommend would be 13 Reasons Why by Jay Asher. It's a book about this girl in this high school commits suicide, and she tapes on audio tapes her 13 reasons why she committed suicide, and they pass from person to person of the people who are all on the list. And so you follow this one guy, I think he's number 5 or 6 on the list, I can't remember, as he listens to the tapes and goes through the journey. And it really kind of was eye-opening, because the misconceptions about suicide is, I mean, there's tons of them and everything, and how it's always like something like trivial or stupid, but it really shows how like the mindset of a person who's considering this, how simple, what seems like simple things to other people end up being like what was actually like the 16th thing that happened to them in this week or whatever, and it just got into too much. And so it was really extremely eye-opening. It is sad, warning, super sad, but I think it's a great book for young adults to read, because it is knowledge that they should have. It really kind of teaches like the empathy that we all as humans should possess. So that's one I definitely recommend as well. And then like Harry Potter and the fan favorites like that. Okay, well, does anybody else have any last minute things before I read off this Rookery Radio schedule? Nope. Okay, so then later today at 1 to 3 we'll be live with Brittany. From 3 to 5 is the Brew Crew. 5 to 7 is the Timeout. 7 to 9 is Caribbean Swing, and then 9 to 11 is the Mix with DJ Nanasty. I'm pretty sure that's a typo, but it says Nanasty, so there you go. And then the schedule for the rest of the week's Rookery Radio shows can be found on rookeryradio.com. Thank you for tuning in. We will be here next week, same time, same place.